My name is Marlene Whitford. I'm 72. I was wiping the kitchen counter when Brittany said it. Her voice clear and sharp like glass breaking on tile. Either you start watching the twins full time, or you'll need to find somewhere else to live. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The twins were upstairs giggling through the baby monitor. The house smelled faintly of applesauce and bleach, my daily rhythm, the quiet work that kept their world running. But her tone left no room for confusion. Ethan was leaning against the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone like the conversation had nothing to do with him. I waited for him to look up to say something, anything. He didn't. The clock on the wall ticked between us. I set down the sponge and folded the dish towel with steady hands. I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm, almost gentle. The kind of voice you use when you realize there's no point shouting into an empty room. Brittany crossed her arms, the corner of her mouth tightening. We just need consistency, she said. The boys need structure, and you being indecisive doesn't help. Indecisive. That was her word for me taking 3 days off after 3 years of 12-hour days. I glanced at Ethan again. He shifted eyes, still fixed on the screen. My son had his father's shoulders, but none of his backbone. The air felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. I thought about all the mornings I'd been up before dawn, the lunches packed, the laundry folded, the bills quietly paid. I thought about the life I'd left behind in Raleigh, the house Calvin and I built board by board. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just gave a small nod. Then I turned and walked down the hall past the baby gate, past the pile of laundry Brittany had left on the stairs into the guest room that had stopped feeling like mine a long time ago. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, cutting the room into thin, golden lines. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle. Somewhere upstairs, one of the twins started crying. I waited to see if anyone would go to him. No one did. When Calvin died, the house in Raleigh felt too big for one person. The silence was heavy there, every chair, every photograph, every drawer full of the life we'd built together. So when Ethan called and said they could use an extra pair of hands for a while, it sounded like purpose. 6 months, he'd said. Maybe a year, just until they found balance with the twins. I packed what I needed into 2 suitcases, some clothes, my Bible, a few framed photos, and drove west toward Asheville. Brittany met me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You're a lifesaver, she said, stepping aside so I could carry my own bags in. At first, it really did feel like helping. I watched the boys while she returned to work, folded laundry during their naps, cooked dinner, so Ethan could rest after long drives. It gave my days shape. I liked the smell of baby powder in the mornings, the rhythm of small hands patting the table when I brought out oatmeal. Then little things began to shift. The grocery list grew longer, and I started paying at checkout because they'd Venmo me later. The utility bills landed on the counter, and I wrote checks without being asked. When Brittany said she forgot to reorder diapers, I ordered a month's supply. It didn't feel like sacrifice at the time, it felt like love. But months blurred into years. The 6-month plan quietly disappeared. Could you watch them while I run a meeting turned into, you've got them all day, right? I hadn't been called mom in a while. Now I was grandma in name, but staff in practice. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing at the window after putting the boys down for a nap, wondering when the line had moved. Maybe it was the first bill I paid without thinking. Maybe it was the night they forgot to ask if I'd eaten. Whatever the moment was, I missed it. By the time I noticed, helping had already turned into something else entirely. It started as a simple plan. Patty from church called one afternoon and asked if I'd like to join the quilting retreat up in Black Mountain. 3 days in a quiet lodge. Good food, no dishes to wash, no baby monitors humming beside the bed. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. I told Brittany that evening while she was scrolling through her laptop at the table. "I'll be gone Friday through Sunday," I said. "Patty's church group has a spot open. I already found a young woman from our congregation to help with the twins while I'm away. She's CPR certified." Brittany didn't look up right away. When she did, her expression was blank, but her tone wasn't. "We don't want strangers watching our children," she said flatly. "It's not safe." "She's not a stranger," I said quietly. "You've met her. She helps in the nursery." "That's different," Brittany snapped. "This is our home." Ethan was rinsing dishes, his back to us. I waited for him to say something, but the only sound was water hitting the sink. "I've been here 3 years," I said more to myself than to her. "I could use a weekend away." Brittany pushed her chair back, folding her arms. "If you can't commit to helping when we need you, maybe we should rethink this whole arrangement." The room went still. I felt the words settle somewhere deep, heavier than they should have been. I finished drying my hands, set the towel on the counter, and nodded. "Maybe we should." Upstairs, the twins were laughing at a cartoon, their voices spilling down the stairs like sunlight through the blinds. For a moment, I envied how easy it still was for them to laugh. I packed quietly the next morning. No rush, no trembling hands, just steady movement, one drawer at a time. The house was still, except for the soft rattle of the twins' toy cars in their room and the faint murmur of Brittany's conference call down the hall. I folded 2 blouses, my best slacks, and the cardigan Calvin always said brought out the blue in my eyes. I laid my Bible on top along with a photograph of him holding a fishing rod on our last trip to Lake Fontana. He used to tell me, "Don't let them mistake kindness for weakness, Marlene." I'd smiled at the time, not realizing how easily kindness could turn into a leash. The guest room looked smaller with the suitcase open on the bed. My things never took up much space, just a few reminders of who I was before my days were measured in nap schedules and grocery runs. I sat for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the clock. No one knocked. No one asked where I was going. When the sun dipped behind the trees, I carried my suitcase down the stairs. The baby gate creaked as I unlatched it. Brittany was still on her call, laughing at something through her headset. Ethan stood in the kitchen, scrolling his phone. He glanced up when he heard me, then looked back down. "I'm heading out for a few days," I said. My voice didn't shake. "You'll manage fine." Neither of them answered. I stepped out onto the porch. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of traffic from the main road. My old sedan started on the first try. 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small roadside motel called Blue Ridge Inn. The sign flickered between 2 bulbs half lit, but still standing. Inside, the clerk handed me a brass key with a smile and called me ma'am like I mattered. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and mountain air. I set my suitcase by the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and let the quiet fill the space that used to be theirs. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain against the window. It was soft, steady, like the world had decided to start over quietly. I made coffee in the small motel pot, its bitter scent filling the room, and wrote a list on the back of an old church bulletin I'd found in my purse. It had 5 items. Every one of them started with the same word, cancel. By 10, I was at the Beckford Credit Union, the same branch Calvin and I had used for nearly 40 years. The woman at the desk, a cheerful blonde named Tracy, recognized my name right away. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitford," she said. "What can we do for you today?" "I need to make some changes," I replied. It took less than an hour to unweave the quiet web I'd built for Ethan and Brittany. I canceled the automatic withdrawals for the utility bills, electric, water, internet, each one under my name since the day I moved in. I removed Brittany as an authorized user from my credit card, the same one she'd added herself to when she forgot her wallet one too many times. I ended the grocery delivery plan I'd been paying for monthly and the daycare drop-in service I'd covered whenever Brittany had urgent meetings. Every click, every signature felt like unclasping a chain I hadn't realized I was wearing. Tracy looked at me over her glasses as I signed the last form. "You're sure about this, Mrs. Whitford?" "I'm sure," I said. "They'll figure things out." When I left the bank, the rain had stopped. The sky had that washed clean look it gets after a storm, pale and bright all at once. I stopped at the diner down the street for lunch, ordered coffee and eggs, and ate them while they were still hot, a small luxury after years of cold meals between feedings and chores. Back at the motel, I emptied the rest of my purse onto the table receipts, check stubs, and old notes scribbled in Calvin's handwriting. The numbers told a story I hadn't wanted to read: loan payments, grocery totals, clothing for the twins, small emergencies covered without question. Nearly every page carried the same truth. I hadn't just been helping them live. I'd been paying for the life they thought they built on their own. 2 days after I closed the accounts, the phone rang just as I was pouring a second cup of coffee. The caller ID showed Beckford Credit Union. I almost didn't answer. I thought maybe they'd forgotten a form or wanted another signature. The voice on the other end was polite, almost hesitant. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitford. This is Tracy from the credit union. I just wanted to confirm something before we finalize your recent changes." "Of course," I said. "Is there a problem?" There was a pause. I could hear the quiet shuffle of papers. "Not exactly a problem, but while reviewing your file, I noticed something from about 6 months ago. I thought you should be aware of it." I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "Go ahead." "An online application was submitted for a home equity loan under your name, using the property at 782 Linen Street as collateral." My stomach tightened. "That's my son's address," I said. "Yes, ma'am. The request raised a flag at the time because your name was attached, but the ownership records didn't match. The system automatically rejected it. When we called the contact number listed on the application, a woman answered and identified herself as your daughter-in-law. She said she had your permission and power of attorney." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air in the room thinned, pressing against my chest like a weight. Tracy's voice softened. "Since we never received documentation to support that claim, the application was closed. But given your recent changes, I thought you should know." "Thank you," I managed. "You did the right thing." After I hung up, I just sat there staring at the phone in my hand. The motel room was quiet, except for the low hum of the heater and the faint drip of rain outside. 6 months ago, that would have been around the time I helped them fence the backyard for the twins. I'd written a check for $1,200 that day. Brittany had hugged me and said, "You'll always have a home with us." I pressed my palms together and felt them trembling. Not from fear, but from the slow, cold realization of what trust had cost me. I stood cross to the small dresser and picked up the photo of Calvin I'd brought from Raleigh. His arm was around me, both of us, smiling sun in our eyes. "You were right," I whispered. "Kindness can become a leash." For the first time in years, I wished he were still here, not to protect me, but to see me finally cut it loose. The next morning, I drove into town and parked outside Mr. Mendris's law office. He'd handled Calvin's will years ago and still sent a Christmas card every December. When he saw me, he smiled gently and offered his hand. "It's been a while, Marlene," he said. "I need to update a few things," I replied. He didn't ask why. Maybe he saw it in my face, the tired calm that comes when a decision has already been made. We spent an hour reviewing documents. I changed beneficiaries, closed joint accounts, and made sure my estate would go exactly where I wanted it to. No surprises, no loopholes. When I finished signing, he leaned back and said, "You've always been thorough." "I just want things to be clear," I said. For once. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. I stopped at the library on my way back, found a corner table, and opened one of the public computers. The cursor blinked against the blank page like it was waiting for permission. I titled the first post, "My Boundaries, My Peace." It wasn't meant for anyone else, at least not at first. I wrote about giving too much, about the quiet ways women lose themselves in the name of family. About how love doesn't mean erasing yourself to keep the peace. When I hit publish, I felt a strange lightness, like exhaling after holding my breath for years. By evening, a few comments appeared. One from a woman in Ohio I thought I was the only one. Another from a widow in Georgia who wrote, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." Their words made the motel room feel less empty. Maybe truth didn't need volume to be heard. Maybe it just needed a place to stand. It was late afternoon when I saw the SUV pull into the gravel lot of the Blue Ridge Inn. I knew that sound before I looked up the low rumble of Ethan's engine, the one I'd heard so many mornings when he left for work. The car door slammed sharp and familiar. Brittany got out first. Her sunglasses were too big for her face, and her hair was pulled into a careless bun. Ethan followed, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. They didn't look like people coming for a visit. I stayed seated on the small bench outside my door, coffee in hand. "You found me," I said. Brittany crossed her arms. "So this is where you've been. Do you even care that your grandkids miss you?" "I care very much," I said evenly. "But loving them doesn't mean letting myself be used." Ethan shifted, glancing at her before speaking. "Mom, this has gotten out of hand. Daycare is impossible to afford and we're drowning. You left without warning. You could have just talked to us." "I did," I said. "For 3 years." Brittany stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Maybe I said things I shouldn't have, but I was under stress. And now, well, things are complicated." She hesitated, then laid a hand over her stomach. "I'm late. We think I might be pregnant." Her words hung there between us, deliberate and heavy. I watched her for a long moment. "Who's your doctor?" I asked softly. She blinked. "Excuse me." "Your OB," I repeated. "I saw Denise Mansfield from Beckford Women's Center at church on Wednesday. She didn't mention seeing you." Color drained from her face. Ethan looked down at the ground. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "But don't come to me with lies. I've spoken with my lawyer and everything's been handled. You have your own lives now. Live them." Brittany's mouth opened, then closed. She turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. Ethan hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, then followed her back to the car. When they drove off, dust rose behind the tires and hung in the air like smoke. I sat there until it cleared, then poured out the cold coffee and went inside. The quiet felt solid again, earned. Word of what happened traveled quietly through town. Small towns don't need gossip to spread. Truth just drifts like smoke until everyone can smell it. Brittany stopped showing up at church events, and someone told me she'd left her job after a misunderstanding with her boss. Ethan kept his distance. I didn't hear from either of them for weeks, and I didn't chase. I moved into a small cottage near the French Broad River, a single story, with a porch big enough for 2 chairs and a view of the water through the trees. The first night there, I slept better than I had in years. The air smelled like pine and rain. A week later, I went to the shelter and met a brown mutt with floppy ears and eyes too kind for his own good. They called him Banjo. He climbed right into my lap and sighed like he'd been waiting for that spot all his life. I took him home that afternoon. At Mr. Mendris's office, I signed the papers finalizing my will, half to the church's Single Mothers Fund, the rest to a new trade scholarship in Calvin's name. He would have liked that. Some evenings, Banjo and I sit by the river and watch the current move. It never stops, never hurries, just carries on steady and sure. Ethan showed up one Saturday morning just as the fog was lifting off the river. He parked by the gate and walked up slowly, a grocery bag in his hand. Banjo barked once, then wagged his tail. "I brought coffee," Ethan said. His voice was softer than I remembered. We sat on the porch mugs, warm between our hands. He didn't speak for a while, just looked out at the trees swaying above the water. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a crayon-smeared card. Red hearts, stick figures, the words, "We love you, Nana." "The boys made it," he said quietly. "They miss you." I traced the uneven letters with my thumb. "I miss them too," I said. He nodded. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it." "I know," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It just means I'm done carrying it." He looked at me, then eyes tired but honest. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who still knew right from wrong. When he left, I turned on the porch light. Its glow spilled softly over the railing. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I whispered. "It's for peace."